First thing we're going to do here is once you have all of your 3 eyelets on the top of your top hanging plate, just like this, and the 4 on the bottom, our next step is we want to take all the required strings, the twine that we're going to be using, tie it all up and get this thing to the point where we want to hang it just in place. So a couple of materials you're going to need. First, you're going to need one of these little rings. You can find them. There's going to be like a little organizer with a bunch of parts inside, including these. The rings will be inside. You need one. You're also going to need to grab yourself 3 pieces of these twine. And these twine, you're going to see 2 different sizes when you go to grab them. You need the ones that are shorter. If you're not sure what exact size you need, these are all cut to 1 foot or 12 inches each. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take the twine, and I found it's easiest if you take each piece, tie it on, make sure you have a nice little tail. I call this part that sticks out a little bit further the tail. Make sure that you have a decently sized tail, and you're going to tie this and knot it, just a regular old knot, and I suggest tying it and knotting it 3 times. The reason why we say 3 times is just because I found that if we do it once or twice, there's a high chance of us having an accident where when we hang this thing up, it falls right out. So we're going to continue to do that 2 more times. To the next part, what we want to do is after we have all these nice and tied off and they're snug, there's little tails sticking off just like you see right here. We're going to just hold it and give it kind of a little bit of a test run, and we want to pinch all 3 little tails together at the top just like this. And the trick is next, we want to get this thing to hang nice and straight, as level as possible. Now, we don't have to use any special tools, just kind of look at it and eyeball it. You want this to be nice and straight and level as possible. After we do that, we're going to kind of take the whole entire disc after we pinch it at the top and just spin it around, kind of like a merry-go-round or something like that. After we spin it a few times, you're going to have to pinch it down here near the bottom, and we're going to take these tails at the top, and this is probably one of the trickier parts. You're going to go and you're going to knot these things just like the regular old knot. Now when you're doing this, a couple things we got to do. One, we got to make sure that we have a nice tail sticking out. So if you have your tail too short, we're going to have issues later. But if it's too long, it's going to look weird for how it hangs, and there's going to be just a weird transition part right here. After we get it nice and straight and true, you're going to take and just pull nice and tight. Make sure that it's nice and taut and not going to go anywhere. If you let go, it's going to unwind, and it should hold nice and true, kind of like what we were holding. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to be attaching this little ring to the top where these little tails stick out. Now, if you did the previous step correctly, you're going to have about maybe 2 or so inches of this little tail that sticks out. Don't cut that off whatever you do. What we're going to do is we're going to take 2 of those tails and hold them. The other one we're just going to let dangle down below. And what I found is the easiest thing to do is take the ring, put it through one tail, and then you're just going to go through, knot this end once, knot it again for a second time. And one of the big general rule of thumbs for the project is, like I said before, triple knotting your project wherever you're using any type of line, just so it doesn't slip off. And then once you're done, you're going to have everything knotted and pretty much in place, and that's not going to slip out or go anywhere. All right, our next goal is we want to clean up some of these like tails that are sticking off, because right now if you take a look, those things are way too long. We want to trim them back. So when you trim them, we don't want to snip it right back to the edge of the knot, because the biggest thing that might happen, your biggest concern, will be if we have any tension that pulls this apart or something that happens over time, your knot could slip free and then your whole thing falls apart. So what we're going to do is leave a little space there, and then take a pair of scissors, leave a little bit of extra of that tail left over, kind of like that. I'd say if you want a measurement, that's maybe about 1/4 inch. And then you're going to snip it off. And we're going to do that to each one of our tails. So snip the first one, the second one, and then the third one at the top. And you're going to do this for any of the other tails on your project, including the ones that are at the hanging points on the bottom, right down here. One thing that you're going to find with your project is when you're using this twine or string, right at that spot right there, or on some of your pieces of string, it's going to do what's called fraying apart, which means all the little individual strands want to kind of pull apart. So what we want to do is, if you have these available, it definitely is very helpful and definitely will make things look a little bit better and cleaner. You can actually use a soldering iron. The soldering iron is going to heat up the nylon, melt it a little bit, and since nylon is like a plastic, it's going to form like a hard little crust on the tip and fuse all the ends together. Sometimes I like to call this fusing. That way these little pieces don't fray apart and fall apart and you have a big issue with your project. So when you're fusing one of these with your project, one of these little points, if possible, you got to be super careful because soldering irons, of course, are really hot. For example, this one that I got plugged in, this one is 375 degrees because it tells me right on the end. So all you're going to do when you use it is you're going to touch it to the end. It might smoke a little bit, which is normal. And then after you do that, you're just going to go through and do that to each of your little ends there. And it doesn't really take much. All you have to do is touch it off, move on to the next one, touch it off again. Just whatever you do, be extremely careful with when you do this, because you don't want to accidentally touch yourself with the soldering iron because it's really hot. It'll definitely hurt. Once you're done using the soldering iron to fuse all these little ends, you're going to notice that these things turn like a little hard and crusty. That's a good thing. We want to make sure that happens to all the pieces, and this is going to lessen the chance of the ends fraying and kind of falling apart. Just make sure when you're doing this, of course, like I said before, be careful with the soldering iron because it gets up to 375, 80-ish degrees. It'll burn you really quick and it's going to hurt. And then when you're also doing this, just make sure that you're not touching any of the rope, because if you do, it's going to burn right through it and melt your rope right in half, which you'd have to restart that whole piece all over again and go back to square one.